This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us Awisi Quartey Bustos. She is running for U.S. Senate. How are you today, Awisi?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you. So are you running as an independent or as a Democrat?
I'm running as a non-establishment Democrat.
Non-establishment Democrat. And
So as a Democrat, yes.
mhm, yes.
Um,
Mhm. But I guess you find some problems with the Democrats that you don't want to get mixed up with. So you want to be your own kind of Democrat, right?
well, I think I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as finding a problem. I feel like in democracy and like anything else, there's room for all sorts of thoughts and ideas, and that's what makes this work. I am not a traditional Democratic candidate, and I'm very proud of that. And I feel like my generation, there are views and thoughts and things that we bring to the table that falls directly in line with what the people want in the state of our economy and the state of our country right now. So I'm proudly blazing my own path. Not necessarily someone who is apart, but bringing a different kind of leadership in a new era. And so that's where the non-establishment Democrat comes from, because I am, by definition, not part of the establishment and
Mhm.
the candidates that are currently running in the seat traditionally. So.
Mhm. Did you ever consider going into politics before Dick Durbin said that he would resign?
So politics, policy, government, public service, as I like to call it, has always been the bedrock of who I am as a person and my upbringing. So it's definitely been something that I have been interested in. And if, you look at my career path and the ways in which I have served the state, it's absolutely directly in line with the path and the vision that I have for my life, which is to offer myself and my services to the state of Illinois and see how I can, like my mom would say, brighten the corner where I am. So that's what I'm doing.
That's a nice analogy. Your
Thank
dad
you.
was a diplomat
Hmm.
for Ghana. So
Yes.
and how did that influence you? Well, how old were you when you wanted to follow in your dad's footsteps?
Oh my goodness. I mean, like most children, our parents are our heroes, right? And I find myself very fortunate to have been born in a family with some of the best role models that could ever have been. And so watching my father's career constantly fighting for human rights, law, and serving his country, part of the his brand was always a statesman, right? So we're public servants and we're statesmen, and we always put the country and the Constitution above our own personal policies or beliefs. It's all about what's better for the greater good. And so that has definitely been something that's been embedded in me. And if you look at his career, he has continued to soar despite what political party, I guess, if you're looking at Ghana's democratic operating system, despite whatever political party was in power. That's because his work and his integrity and his passion and values spoke for themselves. And so whoever was in power at that time, it didn't matter what the party was. We always wanted him to work in the areas in which his expertise could lend to the benefit of the country. And so my that's my long-winded answer to say a lot of who I am and my beliefs and my values stem from that, and having a front row seat at that. And that's pretty much shaped who I am as a person. And as an American citizen, I always said from a very early age, I would say as early as 5 years old, that I wanted to contribute to the world what my father has meant and has contributed to Ghana and the continent. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
When you were small, was your dad able to talk about his work at the dinner table at home so that you understand what he's doing and like the stories? Is there maybe some story that he told about what happened that especially influenced you?
Absolutely. So many, too many to count. But I will say there was a time where we lived in Belgium and I was schooling. I believe it was an elementary school. And at that time, my dad was working on some work that had to do with the Congo and the atrocities of King Leopold. And so despite whatever his work, I remember there was also stuff about Law of the Sea and so many different things. But despite whatever his work was, he never hid it from us or from me. He would always break it down in the most simplest and basic forms, and it all boiled down to the values of courage, integrity, of standing up for other people and for your rights, and to always do the right thing, despite who was watching, right? And so I learned about the atrocities of King Leopold, cutting the hands, unfortunately, of some of the African, I guess, slaves in his colony, in order to produce more coke, more rubber, and at that time. And
Mm.
so I thought that was very, very unfair in my mind, and grappling with that, I remember presenting it to my teacher at that time and showing her. We were learning about history and we were learning about the Congo and Africa, and I kind of showed it to her as a kindergartner, like, hey, I came across this and just wanting to know more. And she basically looked at me and apologized for the atrocities of her country. But that was a very poignant point in my life, which is these stories are powerful, right? And just being able to, even as a child, have that courage to kind of question and examine and have original ideas and just have courageous conversations about the state of the world and the affairs. And that's how you prevent these things from happening in the future, if you're able to have open and honest dialogue and conversations about what could be learned from the past. So that's one example that I can remember. So
So
this
in
has
other
been in
words,
me.
Belgium was kind of colonizing the Congo, right?
Yeah, I mean the
Mhm.
Congo historically, yeah. So King
So
Leopold, Congo was one of its colonies, and they were basically maiming and
just
you know
forcing people to work faster, work more, and
exactly, and
mm,
then their way of punishment was essentially cutting hands and limbs if they didn't produce enough. So you grew up with generations of them who had so much trauma, and these things are well available for people to research and find out for themselves. But you know,
yes,
so
yeah.
yeah.
You were very young at that time to be, thinking about these lurid stories, and then and actually, like, if you were to watch a horror movie, that would be kind of like causing nightmares. But this is real, and then, but so is that a little bit about how you came to be who you are?
Yes, well, I think for the reality is that this also affected children my age, right? So, I mean, my we read the Diary of Anne Frank. We read, Serafina. There was a play about the apartheid. I learned about, Nelson Mandela. I also learned about Mother Teresa. So it was, so many things that gave a very well-rounded view of the state of affairs. For me, building was
Was that when you were in Belgium in school that you read these books, or was it something that your dad gave you to
It
read?
was something that my dad. So we learned what we learned in school, but at
Uh,
home we were also encouraged to read and
mm.
to explore and to examine the state of the world. And so back to your question about what he would be working on at the time, whether he was at the UN or wherever his work, and how he shared that with us. That's how our formal education and at home education went, right?
Mm.
But to also touch on the fact that one, these stories were real. And so if the children who were impacted by these atrocities and they were living it were able to face it, how much more I, just learning about the stories and ensuring that as I get older, I would be part of the solutions to ensure that other children and other people wouldn't suffer these same atrocities, right? Rather than the problem. And so that is the lens with which my father was very intentional about ensuring that he was always truthful and honest about issues and world affairs, and they were always digestible in ways that were appropriate for our age at that time, at any
Did,
given time.
did your dad ever talk about possible solutions to the problems that he was facing? And then, you see him trying to resolve things. Sometimes, even though the will is there, he might not be able to do it. But how did that part influence you?
Well, I think it was always by leading by example, right? So it quickly, it didn't take too long for me to realize at a very early age that people respected him, people respected his work, they respected his honesty and his integrity, right? And so letting your work speak for itself, letting the way you treat and interact with people speak for itself, being a constant diplomat in a sense. It wasn't just a job, it was more of a duty and a way in which you represented and served Ghana, or the country that you were representing at that time. And so those were the ways in which I watched him operate and navigate the world. And it was very fascinating that no matter where we went, my parents were always able to interact and treat people with dignity and respect. And the more love you give out, you receive it back. And so it's kind of part of the formation of who I've been as a person, and everywhere I've touched.
You've been had a lot of roles in Illinois. Could you talk
Mhm.
about those and your accomplishments?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so I have always, again, been passionate about public service and wanting to follow in my father's footsteps. And so I started off as a fellow in Governor Quinn's office. Back in 2011, I moved from Dyer, Indiana, in pursuit of my passion.
So what is
Um,
that? What is a fellow? Is that like a student, like an intern? What?
it's I would say it's like a professional internship, right? So it's a
Oh,
way for young people who are aspiring to get a taste of what government is like. It's a way for them to have an opportunity to work under various offices with various government officials and kind of learn the ropes while getting paid a modest stipend. And then at the end of the fellowship, you get picked up if your work is good enough. So you get picked up by an agency and then that's how you would start your career. And so it was one of those things where I just happened to just be done with an internship at the United Nations, and I had just graduated, and I was Googling how to get into government in Illinois, or just in the US, right? So my path was either moving to DC or moving to Springfield. And I remember seeing this fellowship opportunity popping up, and it was like a day or two before the deadline. I remember calling my cousin in DC because the plan was for me to couch surf with her and make it out there. If after graduation I was like, hey, do you think I should apply? Like, they only have 1 or 2 days left, and they've probably already selected, just like a Awisi, apply. And so I applied in customary Awisi fashion, inundating fax machines with as many applications as I could of my resume until someone responded to me at some point. And that's how I ended up a couple of months later getting a phone call and inviting me to interview in Springfield.
oh,
And the
that's
rest is history. So I moved to Springfield, and I've been working in government ever since. So from the Governor Quinn, I went to work for the Illinois Department of Human Services, for the Illinois Guardianship and Advocacy Commission, sorry,
what?
as a director, Illinois Guardianship and Advocacy
Oh,
Commission,
mhm.
as a director of policy and training for the agency, dealing with, I always wanted to do work that dealt with human rights, law, because I was interested in attending law school and working full time while attending law school, even though a lot of people advise me not to. But I tend to have a thing where when I'm set on something, I don't really listen to naysayers. I just go with my gut and intuition. And so I did that and attended John Marshall, now UIC, Chicago, while being a director of policy and training, and essentially driving 6 hours a day commuting either. I promise I am very sane. So it's behind me now. We now I can smile about
With
it.
all that homework and all
But,
that driving.
oh my goodness. Um, so I ended up doing that. So oftentimes it would look like on the road or on the train. I was fortunate enough to live close to the train, so that's how I would commute and travel all over the state and working a statewide job. After that, I moved on to work for Senator Durbin for 5 years, and in his office, it's where the fine tuning, right? So in life, I believe that you have a vision and you have kind of a general sketch or theme for what you feel like your life is going to look like and the things that you want. And the journey of life still gives you that theme, but it takes, different routes and different places. And then you end up seeing how all these different experiences kind of thread themselves to land you exactly where you're meant to be or where you need to be. So working in Senator Durbin's office was another layer of fully
Experience.
understanding what it was that my dad did, on an international level, but more on outside from just listening to his talks. I was able to look at the cases that we worked, look at the stuff that the senator had, that he worked on dealing with constituents. And so it almost like crystallized where and how and what it was that I wanted to do and how moving to Springfield was the right choice. So after that, I went on to be a senior policy advisor for the Illinois Department of Human Services. And in that capacity, I was able to work on social services infrastructure, getting to the nitty gritty of different areas of the state of Illinois, different policy issues, from immigration to violence prevention to grant and making grants more accessible to our constituents and to smaller nonprofit organizations. I mean, there were some of my work touched on drug overdose. It touched on reentry. It touched on poverty alleviation. So, as someone who's really interested, it touched on immigration as well, if I hadn't mentioned. So it was a very awesome opportunity and interesting time for me as someone who loves policy and loves public service and law and figuring out where all these things kind of intersect. So that was one of my one of the opportunities that I've enjoyed all of my roles, and that was intellectually one of the most stimulating experiences of my career. And after that, I went on to lead the association that represents all the boys and girls throughout the state of Illinois. And in that role, never did I see myself as leading in that capacity in a role like that. But when you think about youth development, positive youth development, and you think about the state of education, and you think about at that time I was now a new mother, it made sense, right? It made sense. It became every role and everything that I have done, there always has to be a personal touch to it. And I was a mother at that time. And so it made sense for me to be able to work towards evening the playing field and being able to offer other children the same opportunities that I, at that time would be able to offer my kid, because all kids deserve nothing but the best. That
So
is
what
just
kind
my
of
philosophy.
opportunities were you trying to get for the kids?
Well, at the Boys and Girls Clubs, so the Boys and Girls Clubs do a lot of, they offer a lot of very valuable resources. So there were some of it where it was, some Boys and Girls Clubs offer robotics. Some Boys and Girls Clubs, they help with academic enrichment, social and emotional learning. A lot of children oftentimes get some of the most nutritious and filling meals at the Boys and Girls Clubs. They have trusted adults that they can work and collaborate with. And so it was one of those things where it just made sense to lead and be part of such a wholesome just such a wholesome movement, and as a mother, it made even more sense to me. So, and then there were, the policy aspects of being able to have a vision, strategic thinking, executive leadership, managing a budget, collaborating with statewide entities, working with the board, working with the staff, So I was able to also tap into a lot of my very creative aspects of who I am as a person. So that's also a role that I enjoyed.
Well,
Yeah, and then
wear a
and then
lot.
here I am.
You wear a lot of hats, so everything is uh getting going, getting put together by you, so that you offer your services. When
Yeah,
you talked about helping people write grants, what did you mean by that? Like
helping people with what?
not write grants, but get grant money. Remember, like at
Oh,
mm,
so it was a program called the GATA, so the Grants Accountability and Transparency Act. And then oftentimes at that time, and even possibly still now, the process of applying for grants, the language, the different platforms and different ways in which you have to apply, it can be overwhelming, right? I mean, even for someone who's been well seasoned and in the space and has looked at contracts and looked at grants from DHS on the back end, written some grants, it still can be daunting. And so part of my work in from an equity perspective under the leadership of the secretary of the agency at that time and was to find ways to close the gap so that smaller organizations serving diverse communities also have the opportunity to apply for these resources, especially with the reimagined public service, reimagined public safety act, and ending and violence prevention with the influx of ARPA funding. So it was really important to ensure that the communities that needed it the most were able to navigate the grant system so there was an equity in distribution. And so that was part of my role in working with teams at DHS to figure out strategies to ensure that that was more accessible to
was
communities.
it doable? Were you able to do it?
Yeah, I mean it's an ever evolving, right? But there were various tools and various strategies that were developed by me by myself in addition and in collaboration with other teammates,
Mm.
and the feedback from constituents at that time while I was there, and the interactions um were very positive. And so while I was there was a lot of headway that was leveraged to the benefit of the constituents that we served. And DHS is an amazing agency, and I'm pretty sure that they're still continuing to serve their communities statewide under new leadership, and yeah, and doing amazing work that a lot of Illinoisans rely on.
What about Dick Durbin? Does he know that you're running?
I believe he does. I mean, a lot of his sentiments, I guess, can be found in in public comments. But yes, he does. He is aware.
And he knows you personally, right? That you've worked together in the office, not, yeah, actually face
Yeah,
to face all the time with policy research. That's a major.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is an amazing public servant and a well respected man across both aisles. And I believe that he has made it clear, that he will be supporting whoever wins the primary, and just letting the process unfold. But throughout my career, he is someone who has had a great influence eh, on how I view public service and what I think a model public servant should be.
When you were helping him with policy research, do you remember like two or three topics that you had to research?
So in my work, I worked in northwestern Illinois. So a lot of my work was essentially dealing with local elected officials, constituents. So there were a few issues that I triaged directly to his leadership team, to the policy team, and also worked directly with local officials in alleviating those issues. So that's kind of how that worked.
Okay, in other words,
Yeah.
they have issues and then they come to Senator Durbin's office and then you try
Hmm.
to
And then
see what they need.
Yeah, so we all have like a sect of the region of the state that we cover, and we all have different policy issues and portfolios that we work. There are people who work directly in DC. He has a senior leadership staff, and then he has the regional team. And so my interactions with the senator would often be whenever he would be in district, attending events with him, staffing, and whenever there were issues that bubbled up, I would funnel them up with my considerations to my direct rapport, who was his number two, and then we would kind of work through those issues to provide the best avenues and resources for the constituents that needed. And then there were other avenues where you would also call different agencies in order to keep track of, for example, like if there was an immigration issue and someone needed help with a passport, as an example, you had your direct agency reports that you would funnel these cases through as you work with the constituents. So
But
it's a
that
very
sounds,
interesting um it's a very interesting network of ebbing and flowing and everyone kind of working,
mhm,
in tandem, but also in their various areas to serve the constituents throughout the
got
state.
it. So it's more of constituent services than that you were overseeing. Yeah,
It was it was constituent services, it was issues, it was dealing with leaders, it was dealing with so it was, kind of like a catch-all, you can say. It depends on what issues were brought up to you at that time and how you would manage to funnel them. But I think mainly constituent services and working to alleviate the plight or the issues that constituents face is probably some of the most rewarding and most important work, because if
well,
you're not hearing directly from them, then how are you able to know what are their needs and how your legislative policies could effectuate real meaningful change, right? So
well, I have a question for you because
yeah.
I think in 2023, my Facebook account got hacked on the day of my birthday. And I went
So
to everyone, FCC, FTC, all the elected officials, including Senator Durbin, and the police, Secret Service, everyone that they suggested. And of course, Facebook, and no luck at all. And Facebook, my content was always very wholesome. But for on Facebook, you still see spam and porn, but they will not let me. They say that I violated community standards, which definitely I did not. So what would you do in that kind of a circumstance if I came to you?
Well, I think for me as a senator, you would have to re-examine some of the laws that allow Facebook to operate that way, right?
Mhm.
I think there are ways where and again, this is me looking from the outside in based on what I've observed from what you shared and also from, social media platforms. There are a lot of these community policies that are very blanket, right? They're very blanket, they're very cookie cutter, and not every situation is a cookie cutter. And so being able to ensure that these platforms that make a lot of money from using public information from people using their platforms are also beholden to the constituents as well, right? And so ensuring that they have more specific regulations and laws and policies that enable them to look more in depth and examine a situation like yours from on a case by case basis
Yeah, they won't even talk
versus
with
a
me. Yeah,
blanket, yeah, versus a blanket policy. Because ultimately I think, you know thank goodness, you're okay and nothing bad happened. But not being able to alleviate this level of concern or a threat that's important to a constituent or even to someone who uses your product, right? What if what you're ignoring could be life threatening? What if you're ignoring could be something that could harm a child? Like, you never know, right? And so getting away from using these automated cookie cutter, systems, and
mhm.
being able to make room for someone to be able to have an actual conversation, so that there's someone on the other side that's able to examine and say, okay, this is what's going on, let's see how we can do X, Y, and Z. I think that would be a way to alleviate. And unfortunately, it's not something that's unique to you. I'm pretty sure I've heard a lot of people complain about LinkedIn and them not responding to some of the complaints that they have when they feel like someone else is violating a policy, and not just LinkedIn. I'm sure it's something that's very very common in the industry, and there just needs to be a better approach to that.
Yeah, I guess the algorithms were set. I had the hacker's email. He came in and then or she came in and changed my email, phone number and password. Not able to get back in at all. No, I gave them all the information and no responses.
Well, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. And I think that, you know, what if that was a government asset, right?
Right, exactly.
So I think that's the thing that people don't think about when
Mhm.
they think about issues. They think it very singular, like it's not my problem because it's just your problem. And it becomes, it's different when it's my problem, right? And so being able to think when I hear your story,
Right.
I'm not just thinking, oh, this is just a constituent or this is just you and it's singular. I'm thinking, what if that same hacker hacked a government asset or something that was very confidential or highly
Right.
sensitive and the
Yes.
federal government couldn't get back into it or whatever
Thank
that
you.
comes,
Thank you.
right?
Yes, exactly.
Not to say that one is more important than the other, but I
Exactly.
think when you're looking at things from that perspective of putting yourself in the other person's shoes and empathizing, you're able to think more strategically about the bigger picture versus being so singular and narrow-minded, right? So when I hear your story, that's what I think about. What if it was a child? What if it was a minor? What if it was someone who was in danger of having their life taken away? What if it was something that, was a government asset or top
Exactly.
secret? You
Mhm.
never know. And unfortunately, these things, it cuts both ways, and something that is damaging to me or the government or whoever shouldn't be more important or take more priority than your issue. It's still the one and the same coin, and so I would give you the same energy that I would give myself or a family member, because what else is there to do, right? So
Yes, thank you
yeah,
for that. What
absolutely.
what about the current issues, such as the ICE and immigration? If you were in the position now, what would you be doing?
Well, for me, I think the biggest issue is that friction in the violation of state rights and federal, right? So there is an equilibrium and a balance that exists between states and their autonomy, but also in the power that they give and the deference that they give to the federal government. And that has been the bedrock of the American Constitution and the equilibrium. And I think that is being threatened right now. Like when you have governors fueling and feuding with the president, like, that is something that's unheard of, and it's something that should not be occurring. So that's one. Two, there is the slow erosion and kind of watering down and dilution of the rule of law and of the Constitution. And I think part of the strategy is when you take something for granted so long and you don't take it seriously and you don't really look at it at the core of what it is that it's being threatened, over time you become desensitized to it, right? And so a lot of the countries that end up failing as democracies, or when you think about, oh, back in the 1940s or the 1950s or this time, they were thriving, we had all these rights, and now we don't have this right. This is what it looks like, right? It's a slowly chipping away at the reality and at the systems. And so that is what I feel like the American people should focus on. That is what I feel like we should work towards. And I think that goes beyond party affiliation. It's the Constitution and the state, and then the people. All those things go before parties. So it doesn't matter to me whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. All that matters is once the rule of law and the Constitution is threatened, then it affects all of us, because just because you are the person sitting on the other side benefiting from this chaos right now doesn't mean that tomorrow the tables can't be turned. And it doesn't matter who's on the other side of the table. What matters is that this is very dangerous and threatening to all of us. So those are the points that come to mind. And finally, more importantly than anything, is the way in which um public service, because ICE and that institution, like it's still public servants, right? And so the lack of leadership, the lack of foresight is in effect endangering the lives of public servants who may or may not fully understand or grasp, right? Maybe because of the ways in which the recruitment is being done, maybe because of the high ticket bonuses. No one knows what anyone's situation is, and they're signing up because this is probably something that alleviates their family or alleviates the situation, and they think that they're doing a service to their country. And so I think that I'm less likely to blame the ICE agents, even though we're all responsible for our actions and we are all responsible as human beings. There's still a chain of command, right? And so I am blaming the leadership, and I want all parties, both Republicans and Democrats, to take responsibility for what has transpired to us getting to this point and working together collaboratively to fix it. Because even if you're the wealthiest man in the world and you're fine and you're able to sit on an ivory tower, I guess, making up an analogy here, what good is that if there are no laws or systems in place for you to sit in that ivory tower, right? So people are so short-sighted where they really think that your problem is your problem, it's not my problem. The reality is we're all so much more interconnected than what we think or what we would like to think. And the delusion is that just because I'm not an immigrant and it doesn't affect me and I'm not being deported. Well, US citizens are being deported now. Well, the cities that you can't go enjoy your expensive coffee in this neighborhood because you have chaos all over the place. You're getting to the point where you're a US citizen and you could also get snatched up because you fit a certain profile. So it's like, these issues are circular, and we need to really start getting back to the basics of ensuring that our neighbors are okay, like, being your brother's keeper, because this world is vast and it takes all of us to coexist. And your right to exist should never and will never come at the expense of someone else's demise or their right to not exist. That is just a basic principle of life.
So when you put yourself in others' shoes and then see the big picture, does that way of thinking come from your education, or did you learn that from your father?
I would say it's very much, it comes from culture, it comes from family, it comes from values. But I do also believe that having an education, and there's such an assault on intellectualism and education, right? But like, that is also for me the delusion, right? So you can be educated by knowing how to change a car tire. You can be educated by being a mechanic, and you can also be educated by reading about world history and philosophy, right? Education is not a one size fits all, and it's not a one notion. It's not someone with a PhD or someone with a law degree. And so I do feel like the more human beings stretch themselves and stretch their minds to understand or even try to understand and grasp diverse topics and diverse subjects, the more you're able to connect and interrelate and have this sense of viewpoint, right? That it's bigger than you, it's bigger than our circumstance, right? It's about leaving something for the future generation. It's about leaving something that our children could be safe in, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're a farmer in downstate Illinois, or you're a street merchant in Chicago, or you're a car salesman, or you're in a law office. We all benefit from this ecosystem and this equilibrium. So if one of us isn't safe, all of us aren't safe. If one of us is harmed, all of us are harmed. And whether you see the effects of that harm today or tomorrow or the day after, it doesn't matter because the like yin and yang, what goes up must come down. It's like a balance. It doesn't matter whether it happens today or tomorrow. Eventually there's a balance and a way in which life works, right? And so yes, so to answer your question, that's my philosophy and that's my belief, and that's partly because of how I was raised and the culture, but also because of my upbringing of living in different countries, working with different people, consuming different cultures and perspectives, and being able to empathize and put yourself in another person's shoes. So
Mhm. What you're talking about is kind of like uh, we are part of the ecosystem, so we can't
Mhm,
ignore some parts of the ecosystem because
mhm.
eventually all parts of the ecosystem do affect us.
100. And I mean, yes, that's it. And these philosophies aren't new because nothing new is under the sun. We're just more modern, but these values are embedded in some of in centuries of tradition and cultures, and mostly indigenous cultures, because there was a way in which you live in equilibrium with the land and you coexist with everyone, because that's what it takes to be able to preserve and pass to the next generation, right? So yeah.
You speak a lot about the education and the importance of uh, kids getting their education. There is a divide between the marginalized and more privileged in education. How would
Mhm.
you, what could you do to bridge that gap?
Well, for me, I believe in everyone having opportunity for education, right? And everyone having opportunity for a diversified level of education. So for and drawing back to, let's say, in Ghana, when I remember my schooling in Ghana and other parts of the world, but mainly Ghana is where I'm drawing from now. We learned agricultural studies, you learned how to grow plants, you learned social studies, you learned how to craft, like we would make stuff out of a calabash. You also learned you learned subsistence farming. Like I mean, I'm literally recalling sixth grade level, and we're learning like stuff that farmers and adults know, because it's a very rounded way of viewing, right? You're learning religious education, and you're also learning a philosophy. And so I believe that that's the kind of education that needs to be embedded in a holistic way, but that everyone has access to. So it's not just whether you're in downstate in Illinois, whether you're a rural white America, or you're in suburban, urban, or whether you're living, in the most affluent neighborhoods. There should be a universal level and a well-rounded way in which our children are educated, so that as they get older, they're able to pick and choose where they're good at and where they want to hone their skills, right? And I also do believe, to take it a little bit further, that US history is important, but world history is equally, if not more important. And I think one of the distinctions between how the majority of the rest of the world is educated is, in Ghana, I learned about US history, I learned about European history, I learned about Latin American history, and I learned about African history, right? You had all these different things. And a lot of the things that I learned from as young as like third or fourth or fifth grade, heck, I'm watching people post on LinkedIn now as a 38-year-old professional, and I'm literally like, it's going back memory lane. So people are now discovering these things because of how easy and readily accessible information is, right? And that's great. But the thing is, how much further would we be as a society if they were learning it in third grade or fourth grade or fifth grade the way I did, or the way the rest of the world does, right? It's like you should absolutely be a master of your own story and your own history, but the world is getting so much smaller and so much more interconnected that you are missing out if you're also not a master of world history and other people's history, because those are the people that you're engaging in foreign trade with. Those are the people that you're interacting with, right? That's the ecosystem, right? And social media and the technology that we have has made those borders so much more smaller. I mean, even in the cultural makeup of the United States, which has been hallmarked as a melting pot, right? How are you going to effectively legislate and serve your constituents if you know nothing about the world and societies in which they come from that make up this what we call the United States in this country, right? So, yeah.
You mentioned on your website that kids should be learning robotics and AI. Would you suggest that they should start learning it in third grade as you were doing your studies in Ghana in the third grade?
So robotics and AI, with my main focus one is ensuring safety and privacy, right? Currently there aren't laws. So yes, I do agree with that, but most importantly, prior to that, there needs to be laws and regulations set in place that protect children. Now people could make AI videos about almost anything, which is scary. That protect children's privacy, that protect people's information, that ensures that AI is not taking jobs from people, and that AI is being used as a tool to benefit and to create more wealth and more income, rather than putting people at a disparity, and enabling corporations and companies to cut corners. And yes, being able to introduce, like my going back to the story about my dad, introduce these concepts of coding and technology in age appropriate bite sizes, because your journey in life and your education is kind of like building, right? It's building on top of each other. And so if they have the foundation by the time they're in high school, heck, they could probably be like, the next Mike Zuckerberg, or whoever else, right? Some of the greatest innovators, or Steve Jobs, right? But you wouldn't know that if you're not introducing them to those concepts and allowing their brains to kind of formulate that thought processes at an early age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about, you also mentioned transparency, how important transparency is in government. So
Mhm.
how is that how could you accomplish that? There's a lot of talk about transparency, but the actual like line by line, actual real transparency, that's hard to come by.
It is, and I do recognize that I have always been a transparent person to a fault. I'd say that is my blessing and my curse. And so in my mind, when I think about that, I think of it in terms of, you know, the left hand knowing what the right hand is doing. So for me, in that position, I'm here to serve my constituents, right? And so outside of getting there and understanding what needs to be made public and needs to have transparency in, what I'm mainly talking about is, for instance, ensuring that the constituents that I serve have direct access to me and are able to voice their opinions and their desires for specific action, one way or the other, right? The other layer to this process is that a lot of times the legislative process, how a bill is moved, what goes on behind the scenes, what bills are attached and intertwined to each other, all that is very mystical and not familiar to most constituents, right? And so most people don't understand that when you vote for a bill, let's say you're upset because Senator X voted for this road to be blocked, but in essence, it also cut or like took away, I don't know, like groceries or something like that. Just making up a scenario, right? In order for that to happen, that bill was embedded with all sorts of things that people had to negotiate and get to the agreement on, right? And so when I talk about transparency, one, it means that constituents in Illinois are able to voice their opinion in support or against a specific bill to such an extent that people are able to see 78% of Illinoisans want Senator X to vote for this or that, right? And 30% want against that or that, right? And then the added layer to it is the people who want this vote for X, Y, and Z understand the unintended consequences and the trade-offs for why X, Y, and Z is, right? So if you think about even the notion of informed consent, right, and patients' rights, um, thinking about that logic in this sense. So if 70% of Illinoisans are voting for this, they have informed consent on the bill, the full totality of the bill, because our job is to break it down to them. And they're voting for this because they understand that they might go to the grocery store and not have plastic bags to back their groceries in, because that was the trade-off, right? And yet they vote for it. So I, as a representative, I'm able to come back home and not hide or have anyone upset with me because, hey, my job is not to impose my viewpoints. My job is to listen to my bosses, you all, and to vote however you want me to vote, irrespective of whatever my beliefs are, because I'm kind of like, you all are my board members, my bosses, right? And I'm just here to serve you. Ultimately, it's a partnership and a contract. So when it gets to a point where my values no longer align with the majority of the people in the state of Illinois, then that means that I no longer need to be serving in the political as a senator in whatever capacity, right? And so as long as my values are in alignment with the majority of the people in Illinois, and therefore my votes are reflective of that based on what direction they give me, that's the kind of transparency I'm talking about, right? That's the kind
Okay.
of honesty. And transparency can be interpreted and moved into all sorts of directions. I'm not in a position to speak on or about things that I do not know, but I do know that from the capacity of serving constituents and observing and being in the space for the years that I've been in, empowering people to understand the unintended consequences of their votes and the impact of it is a step in the right direction. And that could also go into ensuring transparency in other areas if that's how the people of the state of Illinois want.
So
You
when you
know, it,
were working at Dick Durbin's office, was that part of your work, gauging the opinion of the constituents about certain legislation?
legislation. Yeah, absolutely. So and how they would do it is they would call, right? And we would take tallies of and we would log it in. So that's kind of how that worked. But would want to see, more of that where a constituent doesn't have to specifically ask a question because they're more they have more awareness, right? It would be something where it's open for everyone to see that, hey, even if you're not interested in knowing the intricacies of how this works, this is what it looks like on the back end, right? You voting yes for this means X, Y, and Z. So just normalizing that process of demystifying how, what goes on behind the scenes and what goes on in Washington and how things are passed, because the more informed constituents are and the more understanding they have about the issues and about these things, the better the better their the better they will be at exercising their rights, right? To vote for one way or the other, right?
Mhm. And was Durbin able to accomplish that at that time when you were working? Was he able to gauge the opinions and then vote accordingly? Do you have any idea?
I believe that. I mean, if you look at his votes and over the and his tenure, I mean, he's been there for many years, and he continues to get reelected. So I believe that that is a direct reflection of the work and the impact that he has, and how and the status that he has in the hearts and minds of the people of Illinois, right? So I would say that would be where I would look for the evidence of that.
Mhm.
If you do a good job, I'm pretty sure that people would want to continue giving you a shot at that job.
What about you have the law degree? Did you ever work as an attorney?
No, I have not. I've used, and I would joke and say, please don't. This is a sore subject for my dad, so let's not tell him. I've used my law degree more for advocacy, and which is exactly what I wanted to do anyway, and that's why I went to law school. Litigation was never the top priority for me. I know that my mind works a certain way when it thinks strategically and critically and analytically, and I do also know prior to I had an idea of what a law degree does, and any form of education where you're stretching your mind, right, or any sort of exercise, even putting together a puzzle kind of stretches your mind in a way, right, or working with nuts and bolts in a way, but I got exactly what I wanted to get from my law degree, which is understanding the way law and policy intersect, understanding social services, and being able to be an advocate, right? Being able to be an advocate, being also able to listen to both sides of a story, because the Socratic method and the way it applied, you can look at concurring and deferring justices, and as long as the logic was sound and the law was applied, you can always kind of tell, oh, I agree with Scalia here, but I also agree with this here, right? It was never anything outrageous. It's like you might not agree necessarily with the result, but you can follow the logic and the law, and you can agree with the logic of how they arrived, right? Clearly, there were other cases where it was completely on its face and no, but that's what I got from my law degree, and that's what I have benefited and employed throughout my career, and has made me effective in what I do, and how I've served the state.
Any ideas about how to get more education dollars? Because you do want to improve education for our youth, but how 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 would you get more education dollars for what you hope for in education?
Well, I think people prioritize what's important to them, and so just from a general understanding and relaying this, it would be looking at, based on, I guess, what committees and what assignments you're able to get as a junior senator, being able to have conversation and examine, but from a policy perspective, figuring out how to work with the federal government and the state in order to prioritize educating our children, because I think that, especially with how fast technology is going, and if the United States want to maintain maintain a level of advantage or competition, you need to start investing in things, right? So they can boast of having the greatest military in the world because there's been investments in that, right? Well, there also needs to be a balance and investment in healthcare, investment in education, and investment in safety net services, right? It's because again, there always has to be that balance. Once you have one side being top heavy, then you see the chaos and imbalance, and it ripples throughout all of our lives and how we're affected.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so you will try to move education to higher on the list of priorities then, because everything is just prioritized. The money is like a set amount, and then
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you would examine, but I do think that education and healthcare um should be equally a top priority, because ultimately these are the things that we need in order for any society to thrive, right? And that's what we're passing on to the next generation. And so if you're not giving the next generation the tools to be competitive in this um ever changing global economy and landscape where borders are getting smaller and smaller, then what you're doing is you're setting up your constituents and your nation for failure when it comes to competing with the rest of the world. And I do believe that there are probably metrics and things that could be looked at right now that probably highlight and tell the story more specifically of what I am alluding to. So yeah.
Exactly. How are your petition signatures doing? Did you submit today?
Not yet, but we're doing great, and we're, you know, just working, and we're going to
How
put our
many do
best
you,
foot
yeah,
forward.
how many do you need?
How 5,000
Hmm.
is
But of
what we
course you
need.
want more to above in case they're challenged.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, like, it's I think like any serious Senate candidate or candidate, there's a benchmark and a strategy for success and otherwise. And I've never been one to be an underachiever or an underperformer. And so
Where is it easier to get signatures, would you say? Is it that downstate? Is it in Cook County? Where is it easy? Where is it hard? Do you know?
I think for me, I've had my best luck when I just, like even with the conversation that we're having, right? Just like walking up to constituents, it could be at a grocery store, and just being honest and candid about, hey, this is what I'm doing. And some people, and I enjoy that, they'll tell you, I don't just want to sign just for anybody, so why should it be you? Or they have a very specific question, and you just win them over by having a very candid conversation about who you are and why you're doing what you're doing and what you're offering that's different from the rest. And so I would say, yeah, you definitely want to be in places that are well populated and have heavy traffic, because then you increase your odds and your chances of hitting your numbers.
Yes, and of course that's very hard for you because you're only one person and you have to talk with over 5,000 people in order to get all those signatures.
Yeah, and I think that's where you rely on grit. I think all those times of driving 6 hours a day. So it's like, if I could do that, then what else can't I accomplish, right? But you also rely on volunteers, and just just looking at the rules and kind of working with it within those confines and rules to accomplish your goals.
And of course you'll be able to decipher those rules. You have that education with the at the John Marshall Law School and
Absolutely,
everything
but
else. Yeah.
trainers need trainers, lawyers need lawyers, and coaches need coaches. So my education is meant to ensure that I have the strategy that I need, but I will always go to the experts to ensure that if there's something that I'm missing or that I'm not seeing, that's covered, because there
So
are
you do
certain
have
things.
in other words, you have an election attorney.
We're working with people, yes, and
Yes.
so in order to ensure that we're not leaving anything on the table. So yeah.
If our listeners want to learn more about you, Awisi Quartey Bustos, where should they go?
So please visit Awisi for US Senate.us. So AWISI FORUSSENATE.us. There's a lot of information on my website. There's a lot of work. It was a labor of love and intentionality. And so there's something for everyone. And if anything that I'm saying remotely resonates with you at all, please join the movement. Donate, volunteer your time, and spread the word, because it's time for a new era of politics in Illinois and a new brand of leadership. And yeah,
The
that's why I'm
website is
running.
actually very good.
Thank you.
Did you have any hand in writing the statements because they're so well written and very convincing? Or did you just have your team do it?
Thank you. So I will, you're not supposed to tell the secret, but
Oh, good.
it's definitely something that was done organically. And so
Mhm.
what it looks like is all these ideas and everything that you're reading are things that have kept me up at night for years, and they're things that have always been at the forefront of my mind. Obviously, it would be dishonest to say I did it all, but it's not like something that's done by consultants, right? It's like you have people that believe in you, close friends, and you draft your ideas and your vision, and you work collaboratively to bring that to life. So everything that you see, from my website to my brochures and flyers,
And
or
let's
you
look
know
at your palm card. Oh,
right
that's
here.
beautiful.
So like I designed this with the
Yeah.
colors and the
Mhm.
vision and everything that I wanted. And then I'm fortunate enough to have talented people in my corner, and I can say, hey, I have the ideas and the vision and the creative je ne sais quoi, but can you please bring it to life in your with your digital brilliance and have it be a real tangible thing? And it's like, no problem. And you know, we
Please
just
send me a digital file of that. It's very nice.
absolutely. Thank you. I would be glad to. And you know, when we're out, you can easily scan the QR code and it takes us right to the website. So yeah,
Wonderful.
I'll be sure to send you that.
Okay. And are you in Chicago or are you
I
elsewhere?
am I am presently in the Chicago region, so I go back and forth and just, you know,
Okay.
do what I can to cover the entire state, because that's my job and that's what I've done all through law school. And so what's another couple of years of it, right?
Well, you're doing very well. Well,
Well,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much, Awisi Quartey Bustos, for sharing your insights and sharing what you believe in and how you want to help the state as a U.S. Senator.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm very grateful that you took an interest in my story. I think, you know, your interview style and the questions that you ask are very poignant, especially now at this time. And so yeah, I'm grateful, and it was a pleasure engaging with you.
Thank you so much, Awisi.
Thank you.